Okay, let's get the show running, okay? Again, thank you all for coming here. Once again, I would like to thank Momus Thessaloniki Museum of Photography for hosting our event. So, hello speakers. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for collaborating closely with us and putting this together. We're going to talk about PC, political correctness in the film industry in general, and how is this affecting the processes that we're all going through. So once again, thank you, dear speakers. I'll just pass the floor to you, and please enlighten us. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, I forgot. This talk is very important to say that it is in partnership with our lovely collaborators, the Mediterranean Film Institute, MFI. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Thano. Thank you to the Thessaloniki Film Festival, to the AGORA. My name is Chris Vourlias. I'm an Athens-based reporter for Variety, a longtime friend of the festival, happy to be here, and thankful to the festival and the AGORA for letting me be a part of this very important conversation that I think is affecting us all in the room, both as creatives in different capacities in the film and TV industries, and also as audience members and film lovers with the content that we are watching now. And how I think in recent years, we would probably all agree that the boundaries are changing fairly rapidly in terms of what is and isn't politically correct, what is maybe acceptable, permissible on screen in the public discourse, that maybe wasn't, a decade ago. I think certainly, I live in Greece, but from the U.S. perspective, we have seen post-Me Too, post-Black Lives Matter, the pendulum swinging pretty rapidly at times in both directions, sort of reaction and counter-reaction. So these are some of the things we want to unpack today, and I'm very fortunate to have panelists representing both the northern and southern poles of Europe. We can sort of look at how these issues are affecting us in our home countries and also across Europe as well. I want to stress that we want this to be an open dialogue, not only just between the panelists, but from anyone in the room who wants to just put their hand up, has a comment or question, something they want to share with us. You are welcome to be a part of this, and just please a reminder to keep it respectful. We want this to be an open conversation, but we want to make sure we are also respectful of one another. I'm going to quickly introduce my co-panelists before passing the microphone over to them. To my left is Josef Kullengård, the head of industry at the Göteborg Film Festival, joining us from Sweden. Kalasori says, welcome. Next we have Pantelis Panteloglou, the artistic director of the Olympia Film Festival for Children and Young People here in Greece. Yasu Pandeli. Last but not least, we have Apostolia Papaioanou, the director of the Mediterranean Film Institute. Welcome, Apostolia. I'd like to maybe start with each of you just briefly talking a little bit about the work that you do at your respective institutions, how you're engaging with industry, how you're engaging with public as well, and also maybe just sort of put forward your own definition or how you think of political correctness, because even that phrase, I think, has become very slippery and so heavily politicized that it might be hard for us to even agree what that means. But maybe we can start from there.
Yes, so thank you so much for inviting us to the panel. My name is Josef Kullengård, as you said. I'm the head of industry at Göteborg Film Festival. We are the leading film festival in the Nordics, presenting a program of 250 films from over 80 countries every year to a huge festival audience. In my profession, I'm overseeing and leading the industry department of the festival, which includes our annual Nordic film market focusing on Nordic films and putting the Nordics out in the world. We also do a TV drama conference called TV Drama Vision, with focusing on drama series, but also with European outlooks and trying to create an event that also is a navigator for the near future for the industry, with a lot of good speakers on stage and so forth. We also do an annual report called the Nostradamus Report, which is really trying to forecast the nearest 3 to 5 years for the audiovisual industry based on research analysis and deep interviews where we really try to incorporate both like industry perspectives, but also have a macro perspectives on what's happening in society overall. How's the state of democracy and public financing? How is the climate crisis affecting the industry from a near future perspective? So we are kind of like a business to business platform, but also really trying to be like on point with both the current state questions, but also the near future. So that's kind of how we operate. And as for the definition of political correctness, I think it is a very, just as you said, it's a very tricky word since it has become so politicized in recent years. But as a very like basic definition, I would say that it's language, actions and policies adapted to not marginalizing, offending, or excluding people based on certain aspects as sexual orientation, race, and so forth, as some sort of basic concept. Yeah.
Hi, thanks a lot for having me in this panel. I'm Pantelis Panteloglou. I'm the artistic director of Olympia International Film Festival for Children and Young People, a festival that started in 1997, so we're going for our 27th edition in 3 weeks' time. We are specializing on younger audiences, and we are trying to do something that let's call it art house for children in a way. We're trying to provide quality content to kids in a rather small town in the southwest of Greece, in the city of Pyrgos. It was the first festival of its kind in the country, so it has, in a way, it has influenced a lot how things are done with younger audiences in Greece. Also, I'm currently and since last year actually, I'm the president of the European Children's Film Association, a professional organization, which is based in Brussels and represents professionals in children films, which means film festivals, film education organizations, some film institutes, the Swedish Film Institute, I remember actually. Producers, sales agents, so people who are, in a way, in one way or another, involved in trying to find this, to navigate this kind of difficult route towards the younger audiences, which is, I think, a pretty crucial thing, not only for the future, because we always talk about the future, kids are the future audience, but it's also a current audience, which is also very, very important. As a festival, we also have a lot of educational activities, so it's about film education and audiovisual education in general, with hundreds of kids participating in our workshops every year. Regarding the definition of political correctness, I more or less agree with Josef, because we're talking about, it's about language. Language means power. So we need to see how we use language in a way that's gonna provide us with a tool to navigate our social lives and our connection with people. But of course, it's a little bit of a slippery term, because if this is the positive definition, then we're gonna have we need to see that there's also a negative definition of it, which is related to the fact that political correctness itself, the initially positive idea of being politically correct, of being respectful, of being tolerant, of accepting diversity and include different things, and all this idea. When this idea is turned into something that leads to a point where we are lacking critique, or we self-censor ourselves, so we omit any references to political opinions, which are of course part of our lives, and in a way set up the way we act, and in a way not only contribute but also define what we are actually doing I'm thinking that within the context of the film industry, within the more special context that I'm more I know more things about, this is a pretty important problem in some cases. I think this negative aspect is more or less of a misunderstanding, and I think this is the subject of our discussion today.
Hello, I'm Apostolia, Papaioanou from Mediterranean Film Institute. The program MFI Script to Film Workshops has been for 25 years now, since 2000. It's an advanced training program for professional screenwriters, directors, and producers from all over the world. It's funded, supported by the program Media Creative Europe Media of European Union. It's an intensive training program for professionals, which consists of 2 residential workshops. Both of them are taking place in the Greek islands. And there are also 2 online sessions in between. Since the beginning of the program, we have many results, many films that have been developed and have been made through the program. The last 5 years, we have also added a doc and series lab. Now, concerning the political correctness, it's something that it started from the necessity of the society to normalize the discriminations. And people who were people or minorities or categories or groups of people who were either invisible or mistreated, to be visible and to gain substance. I think that in some point that happened, that succeeded. But at the same time, political correctness ends up to be a discrimination itself. For the film industry, it risks to restrict the expression of freedom, of authenticity and credibility. I think that I agree with my co-speakers that there are 2 dimensions or many different meanings of political correctness. We are here to talk with you your ideas and your points.
Cool, thank you. You know, I think when we were speaking recently, Pantelis, you had mentioned that you'd use this expression that political correctness, something that was kind of came about with good intentions. I think you said it was like turned upside down or turned inside out, something to that effect. And we see how it's, you know, again, talking from the this hyper-politicized American context, it's been hijacked and suddenly turned into an insult and something that, as we all seem to agree, is meant to be open and inclusive and bring more people into the room, is now a bad thing and it's a dirty word, and you know, you don't want to be PC, and then the whole cancel culture that has arisen out of that. But you know, I'd like to ask, you know, the composition of the panel is very interesting because we have 3 people sort of at 3 different stages of development and production, starting from script development into the industry and then, you know, the finished product. So I'd love for each of you to talk a little bit about your experiences in these past few years, of just how your job is changing in terms of whether it's the projects you're seeing, the scripts you're seeing, whether it's the conversations that you're having in the industry, at a market, at your festival, and you know, how that's evolving. Are there taboos that you're seeing now that you weren't seeing before? And then after, at some point, I'd like to get into maybe specific examples that we have, and certainly people in the room, I'm sure, have similar examples.
Yeah, where to start with that? So just to the question was more how do we see it affecting our professional situation in the past years?
Yeah, I think specific to for each of you, your specific roles and how you are engaging with industry, with projects that are in development, how the nature of those projects is changing, how the conversations around them are changing, how conversations with funders are changing, and sort of on from there.
I think from my perspective, and I think it's also important to kind of see that it's hard to talk about political correctness in its own little bubble, because what you're really talking about is society overall, and I think it's not possible to, for me, it's not possible to kind of put that out as a piece of a cake and just work with that. For me, I would say my professional navigator and my personal private navigator is what I the core values that I have, and I don't know, I come from a very traditional working class family, so it's typical Swedish social democratic family where those values in a way were kind of even though racism and bias perspective is can it be incorporated in any political field, but I would say that I'm actively trying to not when it comes to reading projects, when it comes to selecting the lineup, choosing speakers, to not be too tokenized, so to speak, but try to kind of keep the perspectives of representation with me as a natural aspect of reflecting the society that we live in, and the society that I want us to be up, how I want stuff to look like, and I think that's something that we are definitely doing in Gothenburg as well. And speaking for the festival overall, we were one of the first major festivals to endorse the 50-50 concept, with having a gender equal program when it comes to producers, to directors and screenwriters. Yeah, that's kind of yeah.
I want to, just before we continue, I want to jump in because I'm getting old and I forget things very easily. I want to make sure we come back to that point. But another thing in our conversation, we were talking about how I think we all in the industry would like to believe we represent progressive, liberal, humanistic values, which more and more seem to be coming under threat. Certainly we're seeing it across Europe with the rise of the far right. We are certainly seeing it in America, what's going to be left of America maybe in 24 hours. We sort of acknowledged, preparing for this talk, that we do exist in a bit of a bubble, and it might feel that bubble is even more under threat now. So something I would like to come back to later is looking at how we are not only the stewards of these particular values, but how we can defend them in societies that maybe don't appreciate those values. But I wanted to maybe go on to Pantelis also.
I'll try to use a little bit of a festival experience to to think. I mean, to reflect a little bit on your question. Back in 1997, in the first edition of the festival, there was our artistic director, who was actually retired 10 months ago. So I'm just the new artistic director of the festival. And he was the founder and artistic director, Dimitri Spirou, had selected a film which was called, a French film, called Ma vie en rose, My Life in Pink was the English title, by Alain Berliner, which is a film about, I'm reading from the which means I need to put my glasses on. I'm reading from the IMDb summary. Ludovic is an innocent 7-year-old child which provokes horror in his community when he dresses in girls' clothes and insists he's a girl. So, that film was screened in 1997. Back then we could say that was a boy who was being dressed as a girl. Today we would certainly change the terms. and we could say that it's a transgender girl, which is a totally different approach, obviously. And in our case, this it was. It's a kind of a risk to screen this kind of a film in the inaugural version of the edition of a festival that's happening in a small provincial town in Greece, pretty conservative actually into this kind of stuff maybe 25, 30 years ago. But it's possible. It doesn't bring up havoc or any kind of disasters. There's no negative publicity around it. Really, I'm not sure if this would happen today. What would be the? I mean, we have obviously we have films that are actually there's plenty of production in this field of discussing about identities and discussing all this LGBTQ or queer filmmaking, which exists a lot and obviously exists also within the context of children films. So we screen this kind of films absolutely, but I'm pretty certain that highlighting, you talked about a bubble, we tend to be outside the bubble by default because we are facing the audience. We're a festival that's facing the audience, so we are in direct contact with the audience. We're in direct contact with the community. We are in direct contact with the teachers. We're in direct contact with people who might be outside of the mindset of this room and any similar room within pretty, it's a safe space to discuss this kind of, for me, it's a safe space to discuss here. So it might bring up some kind of difficulties today, which in many cases maybe you wouldn't have that before. I think it's totally related with that you already mentioned, which is, how the politics turn within the context of Europe, how things are getting a little bit more conservative, how we are, in a way, we're losing some battles within the social context. I think this is, in a way, part of the responsibility of organizations like ours, and part of the whole industry, and part of the cultural agents to be active in this field. It's only small steps that you can do, and in our case, we're trying to make every step possible within that, to that direction. But it's not an easy process, and things are getting more difficult in some cases because the environment is so much influenced up by other things. And you already mentioned that we have elections in the US today. I mean, I don't need to actually put a real argument on the table. We know that this is like a global situation. It's not something that's something that's happening in a provincial Greek town that might be kind of conservative. It can happen, everywhere. So I'm not afraid when we have the possibility to select something that might stir up a little bit of discussion. But I'm trying to be prepared. So this is, I think, what we take as a kind of an experience. So you need to have some kind of preparation. And I have a good example, maybe we can talk about it later. I have a good example of how things might escalate in a negative way, actually, which is also an opportunity in many cases. I'll keep it for later.
Well, in the field of the script, I haven't noticed so many cases. I'm not actually sure, but what I have noticed the very recent years is that there is a fear, a lack of discretion for the writers to write and to deal with many aspects. For example, there is an attitude generally, I haven't seen it in practice a lot, but there is an attitude that a man cannot write for a woman, for a woman character, or a woman writer cannot write for a man. As the protagonist. If you are not a gay, you cannot write for a gay, film for gay. There is an attitude, personally I haven't seen it a lot here in Greece, but there is adjusting the atmosphere. there is something like a fear. How can you do it? Are you sure? Or for example, if a main problem is that if you have a role, a character who is gay in the film, must be gay in life, must be gay. But which is not bad. Okay, it's okay. As long as it's not obligatory. But generally, I could say that in terms of script writing, there is a little more freedom to write for disabled people, for minorities, for gay, especially for sexual orientation. People are more free to talk about these themes, sexual orientation. They are more open than the previous years to talk about such themes. On the other hand, I know that there are some threats in words, how we use some words. If we say black, if we say disabled people, if we say tall or not tall, short. If we say tall, it's not bad, but if we say short, it's bad. But there are things that I think that the writers haven't adapted them, but they are around. Yeah.
Quickly comment. I think like from just like more in terms of how I see political correctness play out when it comes to selecting products, etc. When reading products, you can quite clearly see like two sides of like the political correctness spectrum in a way, where you might have a product, for instance, where you have like a writer writing a Sami film, for instance, which is not like in common. But I would say like the fact that more creators and producers, I think, realize the fact that if you are kind of like writing a story about like a marginalized group or whatever, you know, that you have to engage at a deeper level in understanding like what you're actually talking about. And I think that's like on the positive side of what you call political correctness, that you kind of do your homework, you know, that you kind of engaged in what you actually are writing about. And I think for my personal view is that anybody can write about anything as long as you do your homework. But the other side of that is that where you kind of can see that you have like in a tokenistic way, so to speak, or with like a shallow activism placed out a few, you know, representative elements that kind of like is intended for the story to tick in the boxes, you know. And I think that's kind of the cases where often it's quite clear when it's done, you know. But that's definitely going on still, and I don't see that really contributing to too much. Yeah.
You know, and I think that is something that, because we are so much more sensitive now to these issues than we were in the past, that sort of tokenism, it really stands out. I think people will instantly feel that something is tone deaf when clearly a certain character or storyline was inserted for the sake of ticking a particular box. Apostolia, I wanted to get back to something when we were speaking earlier. You had mentioned that even though you're not necessarily seeing the impact on the scripts you're receiving, you're seeing an impact on the actual atmosphere and the relationships among participants who come to the MFI, how there isn't the same openness and there is, you know, fear about, you know, offending someone. And I think in film and television, this intensely collaborative work that we do, that's something that's almost poisonous to not be able to have an open creative dialogue with someone when, and certainly here in Europe with the sort of co-production structures we have here, you really need to be able to trust the people you're working with. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's changing in the work that you do.
It hasn't changed a lot. Yeah, actually, it hasn't changed. It's different. In film industry, it's different than in television. I think in film industry, people are a little more sensitive, a bit more sensitive. In television, there are no rules at all. in film industry, they are more sensitive, or they are more concerned about this, the behavior, the way of talking. But in my case, from my experience and in MFI, I haven't noticed big differences in the relationship. In the relationships between people and participants or the trainers. Actually, the old-fashioned way, we could say, or the old attitude of training with a very tough, strict trainer, there is no place for it now, not at all. Actually, but somehow it just happened smoothly. Even either because the trainers change their behavior, or they comply with the needs and the necessity and the atmosphere, or they have been old and they retired, and the younger ones have a very different approach. I don't know how it is in the schools or in the universities, but in our program, the younger trainers are very different approaching the participants. They don't use the old-fashioned way of being tough and strict and offensive, even offensive, which was used to be helpful sometimes some years ago, and especially in the universities. The tougher you were, the better profession. The tougher, the better professor you were. But now it's something that it has changed. Of course, the main point is that without you can change your behavior or your way of approach, but not to change what you have to say. Without losing the substance, the essence of the critique. It's a matter of approaching and not the critique itself. The critique should be or could be tough, but the way of telling it can be in a more kind way.
I want to put that question both to Pantelis and Josef, but also to anyone in the audience who wants to pitch in, because I saw a few sympathetic nods in the back. Maybe people who have had experiences at film festivals, at labs, at workshops. Just how you see these sort of interpersonal relationships evolving and changing, and whether you find it more difficult now than you had in the past to speak as freely. If you are more self-conscious, if you are making creative decisions in the script that you're working on, where you are anticipating a reaction even before that reaction actually comes. So I don't know if anyone has anything they want to share, or otherwise I'll put it to Pantelis and Josef if you want to talk about your own experiences in that field. Anyone? Don't be shy. Ah, there we go.
I don't know. Hi, first of all. Can you hear me? Now? Yeah. Hi, my name is Elena. First of all, I just want to say that ever since you mentioned the word political correctness, my stomach became tight, and I'm ready to bite every single one of you if you say the wrong thing. Just putting it out there. I think since we're talking about a word and language and power, and political correctness means about correcting something wrong, what is wrong? What is justice? Who sets the thing right? And to take it back to what Apostolia was just saying, who takes accountability? Because for me, that's the most important thing. Of course, things have shifted from one end to another, maybe, but that's not always a bad thing. Time will tell. And I think I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but in terms of communication, who does the speaking, who does the listening, and who takes accountability? I will repeat.
Hi, my name is Fatih Abay. I'm the Diversity Inclusion Officer of the European Film Academy. I would even recoin the word political correctness because I'm not a fan of that too, but really recoin it into political awareness, because I think we are now living in times, what's going on in the world right now, that we have to be aware what's going on. And I think as somebody working in an institution where we this year even introduced code of conducts, we introduced 2 years ago when I started the position, diversity inclusion standards. So also before on the panel, before I asked a similar question, and the producers really agreed that everything has to be at least in a written form when it comes to a contract between a producer and a director, what is possible, what is not possible. And I think as institutions, and you are all also representative of institutions, including me, I think code of conduct and also guidelines of freedom of speech and artistic freedom, I think these are things which are now institutions are kind of confronted with. And I think if we write down, and then of course we can deal then later with if somebody violates that contract, how to deal with it, right? But I think this is, a big important step already to kind of direct a bit in terms of awareness. And then also what you said, Apostolia, about the different terminologies. I mean, I think we should be also aware, and sorry, Christopher, but I mean, it's a very Anglo-Saxophonian dominant discussion, diversity inclusion, especially in the film industry, coming from the US, coming from the UK, and dealing with 52 countries in my position. I mean, I'm very aware about the localized versions of certain terminologies. Talking, for example, the example of representation of Roma people. In Spain, you use a completely different word, which maybe in certain contexts, in Germany, you cannot say the German expression of the G word. You would be basically completely, that's not possible. But in certain countries, you still use it in the society. And I think in Greece, I think it's a similar thing. In Turkey, it's the same. So I think we should be also aware of this, before we censor basically certain terminologies, because it's coming from the Anglo-Saxophonian dominant discussion. Also about these different type of terminologies, and I think everybody should be aware when certain communities get also vulnerable. They should not be surprised that communities get vulnerable, I think, but I think it's important that you should be aware when you do a project or a film. And to be honest, because we work also with European youngsters in a project right now, and they're very aware of this, you know, and before it was also said in the panel before, it is a very intergenerational issue. So even they are so aware that they're very scared to say, something, because I think they would be censored immediately. So I think it's important to also direct more into this awareness as then political correctness.
Can I actually put a question to you, because it's interesting that you represent a body that, as you said, 52 countries that you are dealing with. I'm curious about just how much. Obviously, there is opportunity in this moment for all of us because these issues are front and center. But I imagine your job has gotten much more difficult, because even in the theoretical best of times, you have a ton of cultural differences to navigate. And now when everything is so hyper-politicized and hyper-charged, I mean, how is that impacting the work you do? And how much buy-in are you getting from, at the local level, from the different stakeholders in different countries trying to find common ground?
I think this is more my anthropologist nature than what I was before. I'm just talking with people and really understand the different perspectives. And I think and obviously we live also in certain times where certain institutions are kind of, or certain groups call certain institutions to boycott them. I'm against boycotts and censorship completely. I think it's, however, important that also those groups who call for boycotts should be also at least be open to talk with the institution if the institution is ready to talk with these groups, because that's also happening. Institutions are aware what's going on right now in the film industry, but certain groups don't want to talk, and then we have to, I think, also leave it with this. But I think when it comes to cultural differences, it's more the language, and I think you mentioned it before, the different languages. We need to know how diversity inclusion is also, what kind of knowledge production is basically done there, because it's not only the Anglo-Saxophonian knowledge production, which is unfortunately dominating the discourse.
I hope I'm not actually being seen here as a representative of America or Hollywood or Emperor Trump or anything like that. But it's just, even though I've been living in Greece for 9 years, I still feel more comfortable speaking about the American cultural context. But I'm wondering if I'd like to kind of pivot from that and put that question to the panelists. When we're talking about, at the institutional level, setting a framework, setting guidelines for particularly sensitive issues. For example, as you mentioned, the example of boycotts, I think all of us can remember back in 2022, after the invasion of Ukraine, the huge amount of support for cultural boycotts against Russia, something I found very problematic because of the way it was silencing, genuine dissent in Russia itself. Last year, for anyone who was at IDFA, we saw the way that festival sort of got caught in the crossfire, where they were being criticized by both the pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli position, and really there was no way for the organizers of that festival to have handled that situation in a way that would have made everyone happy. For each of you, for these sort of hot-button issues, I mean, institutionally, do you have any sort of guidelines? How do you navigate these spaces where you have a subject that is it's in the culture, it's in the discourse right now, you're going to piss a lot of people off either way. How do you kind of navigate the fine line, as the Agora has put it?
In our case, we are lucky because we are in a discussion with a very specific audience in a very specific city. Mostly, this is our audience. So usually, what we're trying to do, in a way, we're always ambassadors of new ideas into this audience. We need to see what are the limits in each case, and I think that in the end, because what we're doing is that in the end we're screening films actually. So it's the film that leads you actually. If you have good films, then you can certainly open up discussions. A film can open up discussion about various controversial issues, and the discussion might be useful, and you might want to open this discussion. So yeah, the film is the best way to get into the discussion. I'm not a big fan of leaving people out for some reason. I mean, I totally understand any kind of I have political opinions of my own, and I believe that there are issues that are this is there's someone who's right and someone who's wrong in this kind of conflict. But I'm not a big fan of having this idea changing the way I would like to have the content of the festival. But it's a ground for discussion. Festivals are grounds for discussion, but it depends the level of discussion, the kind of discussion that you have. It depends on the actual reality of its festival, of the ecosystem around it, of the community that it is addressed to. So for us, we are always the most progressive part of the discussion within a community that might be a little bit more conservative. But this is how we move on. I mean, I'm coming from a social sciences background. Things change. Everything says in our experience, in human experience, that things change fast, and change not always in the direction that we would like them to change. But it's also that they don't change alone. They change because we do things or we omit things. So yeah, this is why we were talking about responsibility earlier, right? For me, this is the main thing, that we don't have a really written set of guidelines to do something. Written sets of guidelines means that you have something like a law, but we also know from the philosophy of law that law can be written and rewritten and will be renegotiated. And if Trump is elected, then the laws are going to be a little bit different than if Kamala Harris will be. So it's also part of the democratic process within our societies, and even the not so democratic process in some cases. What we are doing, and I think this goes for everybody actually within the field of film industry, is that we are trying to provide a meaningful to use a meaningful tool, which is film, to participate in a dialogue and to ignite thoughts and sentiments and discussions among people. It's the most open thing that we can do. So I think by default our field should be a little bit tolerant, open, diverse. You can use whatever term you like. And I wouldn't start by using the term political correctness. I don't really need this term. I need the rest of it, and I need the real thing that's about respect. I don't know if I answered the question, if I just said something else, but I think...
No, but I can just like agree on that, and I'm not working with programming the festival, but I know that the festival programming have a certain like a certain list of criteria on which we prioritize our programming, basically. But I think like it's in every festival's responsibility to maybe search for more complexity than consensus, actually, because I think that going and I really like the idea of a term, political awareness. However, that also is maybe even less clear in some cases, so it will take like a definition every time that you kind of like, what are you to be aware of, and from which political standpoint, etc., and which view of the world, which is very divided at the moment, as we know. So I think like what we are doing is really it's multi-layered, because films are films, and we are not making the films. We are kind of programming them. We are screening them, and we have a responsibility to kind of in that have a diversity of perspective and present like the complex reality that the film depicts. At the same time, festivals in itself, at its very core, since the first festival was created back in Venice in the 30s, are political entities. In a way, they're operating within a system that is defined totally by the society we operate in, and the festivals are like platforms for activism. Could be both like active from the festival side or used as a platform. And I think that it's just as with political correctness or awareness, it's something that we need to kind of work with constantly, and not work at a set of guidelines. For Gothenburg, I would say we are an independent organization. We are not connected the region or the municipality or something more than that we get support from them. And I think that have given us an opportunity to kind of, in certain cases, put ourselves out a bit when it comes to I don't know, having like a yearly focus on apocalypse, talking about the current climate crisis, or targeting quite heavily feministic issues. Yeah, you know. So I think that every festival in its entity have to kind of like see what can I do to, what can I bring to the table.
You know, it's interesting. I think a lot of us, a lot of people would like to think of festivals as an apolitical, non-political place where you know, you just go to enjoy films and then have, you know, polite conversations after and go home. And anyone who's worked within that context knows that's not the case. And it's interesting also to speak about festivals and also films as well. As you were saying, Pantelis is sort of a proactive space, a political, a reactionary space. And it's interesting to look at that within the context of how much the politics are kind of shifting under our feet. And I want to go back to the case study we had discussed earlier, because I thought that was really fascinating to bring up the example of a film in 1997 that would be very controversial today. And we actually had a case in Greece last year with the short film Shower Boys by Christian Zenderberg, thank you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that film and the sort of moral panic it created in Greece.
Yeah,
Who's Swedish, right?
Yes, he's Swedish. I'll try to. It's a long story, but I'll try to shorten it as much as possible because we don't have, you know, much time. I mean, I could talk for 3 days for this. Sorry, I'll make it very short. There's this Swedish short film by Christian Zenderberg. It's 9 minutes long. It's called Shower Boys, and it's the story of 2 boys who leave their hockey practice, where there's this coach that says, "You are real men." So it's and they discuss as they come as they return to one of the to the home of one of the boys. They discuss about being a man and masculinity. In a way, it's a film about toxic masculinity. There is a scene in the film where they are discussing about they are like 11, 12 years old, something like that. And they are discussing about their experiences. Have we ever kissed anyone? So there is this, the one boy has kissed someone, but we don't know who. The other has not. So the boy says, so I'll kiss you. And they kiss. Like a very, it's nothing. I mean, it's a very simple touch of lips between 2 boys. And there's this part of the story that also takes place in the sauna. We're in Sweden. It's pretty standard procedure actually. And then they are in the shower, and then there's one father who says, "I think this was inappropriate." And then the other father says, in a phone call actually, that this was their business. So this film is part of a platform that we have in Greece. It was funded by European money. It was set up by the Greek Film Center, the former Greek Film Center. Now it's turned into the new organization. And it's available in schools for free, along with educational material that tackles toxic masculinity, more or less. I'm going very fast. So one day, there's this guy on national television, a lawyer, going around the channels in May 23, accepted in all private and public TV channels, who's talking about a teacher who screened a gay porn film to some children in a primary school. That's the story. It took like a number of days to have. I think it's a case study of how things might go wrong in a way of escalation, and in a way how you know, fake news is created, and what media is in its you know, in its structure and in its production process. Let's say that. There's a film that's totally, nobody has seen the film actually. This is the main issue. Nobody has ever seen the film, and they are talking about this gay porn film that was screened in a primary school. It was a very bad experience for us. We were one of the contractors for the Greek Film Center who had prepared the curation, and we had selected the film actually, and we had prepared as a festival the educational material, and we were kind of, you know, caught in mid-fire for this. The discussion starts from the lawyer. It ends up that the lawyer is like a month after this incident, we had elections, and the lawyer is a candidate for the far right-wing party that's currently in the Greek parliament. That is the party that followed up the Golden Dawn, which I suppose that you all know. It's called Spartiates, the party, and the lawyer is a member of this party, and he's elected in the elections. So we're talking about political agendas against film education. Who loses, who wins? It was not a very nice experience. But I think this kind of experience provides us with a useful possibility to reflect and to see that what we're doing matters, and of course that we need to be prepared for, in any case, for the worst case scenario, which means that when you're actually trying to do something that will be will have some kind of impact, you need to, assess the environment, choose your battles, and in some cases, I mean, you cannot. In this case, you couldn't just not give the battle, in my opinion. We tried to do it as much as it was possible, because it was not only our responsibility, of course, but also the Greek Film Center's responsibility, since they, we had suggested the film and they had selected the film, so it was a little bit of a complicated issue, also related with official schools and how the Ministry of Education didn't react in support of the platform. So we're talking about, someone might come up with something someday which you don't expect, and provide you with a very difficult experience, in which, of course, you can also find the power to overcome. Yeah. And I think this is a very nice. I tried to say it very. I mean, there are a lot of details, of course. It took 3 days, 2.5 days actually, to have the obvious thing. Someone asking the director. Okay. Obviously, there was a director for this film, and he was also director-producer, and he had an idea of what he had done. So it was just one voice all around. Not funny. A little bit more difficult environment than the environment that would allow us to screen Ma Vie en Rose 27 years ago, I think, in a way. But this is, reality.
I was thinking about something similar earlier today with the sort of performative outrage that we see, particularly, I would say from the right, and especially the way social media is able to not only circulate but amplify these often, as you say, very political, very cynical reactions, which, as you said, aren't really about the content of the film. And I was being reminded of, I don't know how many people in the room were in Thessaloniki back in March during the documentary festival, but there was the example of Stray Bodies, Despotak Kormia by Alina Psiku. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a really thoughtful, moving, beautiful, and very powerful documentary about women in Europe who are compelled, because of the laws of their country, to travel to other countries to have medical procedures done. And in particular, she focuses on abortion, in vitro fertilization, and euthanasia. So it's a film that might have been provocative in any sense, especially in Greece, which I'm sorry to say is still a fairly conservative, patriarchal country. But in particular, the poster of the film, for those of you who haven't seen it, is a semi-nude woman, a bare-breasted woman, who resembles the Virgin Mary, who is being crucified. She's on the cross. So as you can imagine, this poster went over very well with the Orthodox Church. I mean, I think it was 2 weeks before the film even premiered, the poster was released. It became a sensation in the media. There were right-wing politicians jumping on. Various bishops and archbishops were penning angry letters. They were mobilizing, their supporters to come to Thessaloniki and to protest and to disrupt the premiere of the film. I know the organizers of the festival were liaising with the police. They took it very seriously. There were security threats. And in the end, the night of the premiere, if you were at the Olympian cinema, there were riot police everywhere. I mean, it was like a medieval fortress. And the protests themselves really never manifested. I think there were far more counter-protesters who showed up to support the film, to support the premiere, than there were any sort of religious zealots foaming at the mouth about this provocation. And, I don't know to what extent maybe that says something about the presence of all these riot police, but I think there's certainly a lesson to be taken from that about, again, this performative outrage and the way that I think small vocal minorities, more than ever in 2024, can hijack a conversation because they have the platform on television, on social media. And suddenly, even in the case of that film and that poster in Greece, I'm sure the average Greek was probably offended by it, but I don't think they cared so much that they were going to march in the street. But it was a few very kind of manipulative figures who tried to, get some political gain out of that. And I think that's something we are dealing with more than ever in 2024, where the smallest incident can suddenly get blown radically out of proportion.
I think it's important to say that there was this letter that the Bishop of Thessaloniki wrote to the festival, and I'm mentioning it was a very kind letter actually, and I think but also very conservative and very it was a very it was an argument actually, but the reason I'm mentioning it is that we need also to take a look again at the answering letter by the festival.
I want to take a chance now to open up to the floor for anyone who has any questions or comments or any personal experiences they want to share. Anyone?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Niklas, from producer with the Swedish delegation. No, I think very thanks for sharing your story. It really hits you when we hear about it. And I just want to ask you, after this experience, if you could go back in time and relive this experience again, would you have done something differently?
Absolutely not. I mean, we didn't do anything wrong.
I'm so glad to hear that. Very glad to hear
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
The thing is that you need also, the thing is, if you're going to prepare for this kind of, out of proportions, this explosion, actually. Now we know that it can happen, so yeah. But it was not the first time, actually, that this has happened with a festival film, and this was not in the festival. This was in a special platform for schools, so it was a very specific use, not a public use anyway. But in the past, we have had similar issues with the festival, with tabloid front pages and this kind of not very nice things happening. Yeah, but it doesn't really change the focus of the festival. But you need, of course, to see, there's one thing, if the people who are actually reacting are like, this kind of very extreme special case like this one, of course you're changing nothing. But if you are within an environment where the community that you are addressing to is thinking in a different way than you need to find a way to cross the bridge. So obviously you're going to do something, which is not to self-censor, maybe, but to prepare your audience, or to create an environment that this specific thing could be, this specific film could be screened without any kind of issues, with proper preparation, actually, which is something that we do a lot in our case, because when you're working with, nice, innovative films and audiences that do not really have that much experience in watching. I mean, it's not, the regular festival goers. It's not like that. It's simple people who do not really watch a lot of stuff outside the commercial sphere. So you need, of course, to prepare them. So it's a big part of our work anyway.
Brilliant, thanks.
I want to maybe, sorry, did you have a, okay, sorry. You know, I think most of us working in the cultural space in Europe, you know, we are working in heavily publicly subsidized industries. As you said, you know, not only as a film festival are you reacting to the public, most people are to some degree or other relying on government financing. And as we are seeing the political, you know, winds blowing further and further right, many countries in Europe to begin with have not been, you know, doing backflips to give more money to the cultural sector. So these institutions and funding, certainly here in Greece, you know, producers are constantly fighting for financing that the government is very reluctant to give, despite maybe their promises and best intentions. So I'm wondering how you are all thinking about that, the way, as you say, we operate, we work in societies that might not always be culturally aligned with our own values, but we are still beholden to them as our audiences and sometimes as our funders. And how do you navigate that? How concerned are you for the future of these institutions in countries that maybe don't put the same value on film and culture that we do?
I think there's not even one country that shouldn't be worried about the current shift in the political climate, but I also think that it's a moment of opportunity for all of us working in this area and for all of us having a sense of sharing the same values in a way to kind of redefine what we actually want to work towards, you know, because I think and going back to the definition of political correctness, I think it's the worst thing with that expression and kind of what it has like been used as is that it has really given like a powerful weapon to target the, I don't know what to say, liberal values or leftist values, I don't know. So I think it's crucial for us to kind of like take this moment to have a discussion from a structural level and engage in complexity and not kind of like try to define what's right or wrong, because if it's something that is consistent in the human like in the human history of the human race, is that it's always reactions and counter reactions, you know. And I think that maybe that's like unavoidable. It's the same thing in cinema, really. Like that's kind of like the rebellion has always driven the development in a way. But I think we need to take this moment to kind of like, okay, what kind of like future do we want to work towards, rather than defining what's like right or wrong at a very, very box ticking level, so to speak. A deeper political discussion.
Last June, we had this forum in Erfurt in Germany, the Kids Regio Forum, which is Kids Regio is a German organization that's working anyway in children films, and Tina was there. We had, I think, a very productive 2 days with a lot of discussions, which ended up to this point again, that we need to realize there were a lot of organizations being represented there. I was there as, with my capacity as the ECFA president. And I think that the overall, you know, the problematics and the way that people think within our field about the current challenges, let's say, is that we need to fight within the context of wherever we are. So, for example, it's important to, we were discussing about children films, and we were discussing about how we can, you know, make sure that we still have some kind of understanding of childhood, for example. What is the understanding of childhood nowadays? What's the definition of childhood? So, we cannot solve it, obviously, now, but I mean that if we discuss within a specific context, then we can form our arguments. And we need to put our arguments, you know, together, because there's another side that's doing a totally a work that's going towards a totally different direction. So, yeah, and I think we're on the same side of the river.
Apostolia, when you look at the work you're doing at the MFI, do you feel these threats from outside impacting the experience for the participants, or how do you think about the work that you're doing with the MFI right now at a time of tremendous external political pressure, whether in Greece, all around Europe?
In terms of what? Of the function of MFI? No, I don't feel anxiety. I don't. Not for that, actually. Well, I think that in MFI, I think that we feel free. We talk about everything free, and I think that the art itself has the ability, has the strength to correct the things, no matter what is wrong, as long as it's not political. The political and correct together, it's complicated, it's difficult. For example, in this year's program, we had an Israeli-Palestinian co-production, which was very nice. And there was no matter of political correct or whatever. It was something very normal. There was an Israeli-Palestinian co-production. It was just normal. We had a project in the Doc Lab from a Ukrainian writer who was making a documentary about her father, who was for the Russians. They are both Ukrainian. She was Ukrainian, and her father for the Russians. And that was a very big issue, a very big conflict for her. And she was making a documentary for this personal issue. And all these things happen just normally and smoothly, without ticking the boxes. Or without having to say, I ought to make a documentary about the Ukrainians, or I ought to make a co-production with the Palestinians because it's right, it's correct, I have to do that. And for us in MFI, it's not... and of course, it's also my own opinion. I deal with all the participants and the projects equally, and. For example, we had an application asking for scholarship, saying that I am from a country that is in war and I need a scholarship, blah, blah, blah. That was not a political correctness decision. We examined the application for scholarship along with all the applications for scholarship. And because otherwise, it's like you point out the different, that this is different, and you do exactly the opposite of the political correctness, of the political correct. You say, I have to do that because it's different. That's not normal, so I must do that. I think that freedom and respect and appreciations are the main values to keep in the art and to correct the discriminations.
I want to ask each of you, one of the questions we posited at the beginning was this idea, the fears that PC culture is stifling artistic freedom. Do any of you see that happening now? How do you feel about the climate now? The ability for someone with a radical idea or a particularly provocative idea to actually take that script, develop it, get it into the market, finance it, and then find an audience?
I think it's kind of like I think it might be true in some occasions, but I think like the perspective of inclusion and diversifying the perspectives of stories that we need to bring out there has with this, I don't know, it feels like doing it. I've also been thinking throughout the discussion now, it feels like, what are we actually talking about? We are not talking about political correctness, we're talking about something else. We're talking about something that's much bigger than political correctness. We're talking about the current political climate overall, you know. So it feels, yeah, as you said, it hurts the stomach a bit when you kind of mention that phrase over and over again. But I think the core is really that we need to be brave to engage in stories that are complex and to trust the audience to understand and interpret what the stories are. I think that what political correct perspectives have created in certain cases, and I also, again, relating to my own personal background, as I said, I come from like a family that is definitely haven't been in the culture sphere. No one has university education, etc. But I can still feel that the values that they are carrying, my family is carrying, is still the same that I'm fighting for in a way. But I don't think that they would be work very well in a political correct conversation in that sense. So it's also kind of like, how do we lose any allies in like narrowing down like the phrases that you can use, the stories you can tell. Who are you really representing? Who are you losing in that transition? Like, I'm sure that you know, you can really lose something in both ends. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think that, you know, I'll talk as an audience. I think that when you watch films that you know, tickle the boxes, usually they're not good films. So this is something that I think goes with the territory actually, and it's related to something that was mentioned in the previous panel. It was a discussion about risk, and there was this question: would you take risks and why? And I think someone. Anyway, and the producers who were on the previous panel in this room were saying, yeah, of course we would take risks if the stories, you know. But of course they are not really mainstream producers who are producing, you know, films that are more or less the kind of stuff that gets a little bit more that's within the boxes. I'm not in for boxes, but I don't think this is a new thing. You know, I don't think that if someone has an innovative idea or, you know, a radical idea, something that's new, that's not, that doesn't really tick the boxes of a production field, it's not new that it's difficult to push the barrier, actually, to be able to get into the system of production. So I don't feel that we have a specific problem with political correctness, to be honest. There is this problem with the quality of films that we get when we just tick boxes, which is, you know, the kind of film that, okay, you need to have some kind of inclusion and diversity, so you get a film which is not that funny, but at the same time, you know, there's this black guy and this gay character and this character who's like this and like that, and it checks all the boxes. Everything is there. There's full, you know, representation of all groups, but then you don't have the film. You don't have a story. You don't. It's not. Let's think about the stories, not about the boxes. I think, and then we get to something which is more authentic and actually ticks the boxes, because it's not about how you check it beforehand. It's about your process. It's about your actual artistic endeavor, in a way. And I think from the point of view of an audience, this is the only thing that makes sense, and this is the only thing that actually makes sense also financially about a film. It's the only thing that can actually sell tickets, and the only thing that can actually stay with us forever in some cases.
No, I think to the credit of writers and filmmakers and creators, we are all very adaptable creatures, often working in very difficult environments. So even if the guidelines of what isn't okay, are changing. People just find, like water, just kind of always finds its source, finds a way. We have 5 minutes. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments or criticisms. No one?
We are obviously mostly talking about film here. And this isn't a boastful moment, but it's worth just talking a tiny bit about the Greek audience. I wrote a short story which was adapted for TV on the national television station, which was about a young woman pressurized to marry in Greek society to a man by her parents. And she reaches the age of 30 and falls in love with a woman. And when we adapted it, I was really curious to see if they would actually include what would be the first lesbian kiss on Greek national TV. And of course there was a sharp intake of breath. And why is this in here? So I was able to point them to the part of the book itself, which they had obviously read slightly superficially, and kind of failed to notice that this was actually what was going on. That very courageously, my scriptwriter, Alexandra Katsaru, who's 30 years younger than I am, but much bolder, she really insisted that this should happen. And what was really interesting, the first gay male kiss had happened on Greek TV many years before. So, we insisted that this should be filmed and should go on, I think it was Saturday night, primetime television. And there was a huge response, positive, on Greek television. So I think in even what seems sometimes like a very conservative society, if something is within the context and makes sense to the audience, that it's there, rather like you were saying, that it wasn't box ticking. We didn't set out to become, that first kiss, but it's something that slightly pushed the boundary forward. So it can happen not just in film, where people are maybe more open-minded, maybe more expecting something a bit that's going to push their own boundaries, but even on television, which of course is sometimes reaches more people. So that's my only comment. So
thank you for that. That's amazing.
Career-wise, it was probably the proudest moment of mine, that I'd done something that just pushed the boundary a little bit, and it was worthwhile.
I think we can end on that hopeful note, because it's good to bring a little positivity to the end of this conversation. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I want to thank the panelists, the AGORA. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. And καλό festival. Καλή συνέχεια. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Just to remind you, there is a happy hour right next door, so you can continue your discussion.